Alright, welcome back to the channel. Warhammer Man back in the studio, and today we're taking a look at the new Warhammer 40,000 Codex Tyranids Errata. If you're new to the channel, make sure to like and subscribe for Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, and warcry content as well. So we see here today the Codex Tyranids update for 5/13/2022. That is today. Let's take a look. So obviously the Tyranid Codex is very strong, has quite a few awesome abilities and combos, so we were expecting them to kind of clarify and fix a couple of things, and then also potentially rein in a couple of abilities a little bit, and then obviously at some point in time we'll get the balanced status slate, and we'll see where everything kind of hashes out from them. So that being said, we have the Codex Tyranids Indomitus version 1.0 for the brand new Codex. Updates and Errata. Page 55, Leviathan Psychic Power, Hive Nexus. Change the second sentence to read, if manifested, select one friendly Leviathan core unit within synaptic link range of the Psyker, and select one synaptic imperative ability of a friendly Leviathan synapse model that is also within synaptic link range of this Psyker. So we see basically that the psychic power has been limited now to apply only to core models. So previously you could basically take one of these synaptic imperative abilities from a model within synaptic link range of the caster, and then you can transfer that ability and make it active on any unit within synaptic link range of the caster. Now you take the ability from someone within synaptic link range and then you give it to only a core unit. So a lot of what we were seeing previously was, like, say for instance, the zoanthrope special ability, where it gives monsters and synapse a 4-up invulnerable save and everything else a 5-up invulnerable save. Previously you could use this ability to, on a turn that 4-up or 5-up invulnerable save was not active, you could every turn give one unit a 4-up invulnerable save with this psychic power. Or say for instance, allow that unit, like a Maleceptor, to cast a psychic action, and then the remainder of its cast could be used on psychic powers, which normally you cannot do. So they have eliminated that. Now you can use it on core units. So you could use it on, like, warriors, you could use it on, you know, a Carnifex to give a Carnifex an invulnerable save or extra movement or something like that, or you could use it on basically like gaunts or something like that. So extremely limited, the psychic power, and completely changes its functionality, as the majority of the abilities, I shouldn't say the majority, but a lot of the abilities that made this psychic power really, really good now are not really that functional, because if you give, say, gaunts an invulnerable save, or warriors or something, you're going to be giving them like a 4-up or a 5-up invulnerable save, which is still good, but it's not nearly as good as giving it to, say, like a harpy, or giving it to, you know, one of your other big bugs. You know, I can't think of the actual names of them right now, but some of the other ones that don't have an invulnerable save that are big bugs. So still really good, still nice, but probably making it so Leviathan is not like the automatic include now. So we're starting to see some of the other, by making the psychic power not quite as good, that was, in my opinion, like the maker of the deal, like the deal maker that made it so Leviathan was really good. Because if you actually pay attention to the main ability of Leviathan, it's pretty good, and at first look it's intimidating to people, saying like, oh, my synapse creatures can only be wounded on a 4-up, but most of the synapse creatures are toughness 8. So for the majority of synapse, unless you're attacking with a 9 or higher strength, it doesn't matter. And then for like gaunts and, you know, warriors, things like that, I mean, it helps more. The truth is, like, for gaunts, it only works for like a 1 or a 2 if you're non-synapse, and they're toughness 3. So sure, most things that are 6 and up would be wounding them on a 2, but you're probably not shooting a bunch of strength 6 shots at like toughness 3, like termagants or hormagaunts or something. So the majority of the time, this ability is actually like not nearly as good as people act like it is. So I think now it's going to open up like some potential for some of the other high fleets instead. So I think this is a good change. It doesn't completely ruin the psychic power, but it definitely alters it enough that it's not like an auto include, you have to have this. Because one of the things about Tyranids is they only have 6 total psychic powers, So they have a bunch of psychers and the ability to use a lot of psychic, but you end up basically just having a bunch of smites if you only have 6 psychic powers and a bunch of people with 2 casts. So having the 7 psychic power, that's really good, was huge for them, and I think this really limits that quite a bit. The thing that I think people don't realize about Leviathan is it really only is great depending on the composition of your army. So if you're taking a bunch of gaunts, sure, Leviathan is good because they can't kill your gaunts on 2s. Now they need to kill them on 3s, 4s, 5s, etc. If you're taking a bunch of Tyranid warriors and they're shooting your warriors with like las cannons, sure, it really helps your warriors because they're obviously less than, toughness 8. So anything higher strength than them is going to hurt them badly and do, a bunch of damage. So that helps a lot. But if you're taking a bunch of like monsters, it's not really that great. I mean, unless your opponent has a ton of strength 9 and up shots, and even then, what are you doing? You're eliminating, 1 or 2 wounds here and there. It's not really that great. I think a big portion of what made it so good was, one, it initially seems really good until you start digging into like when is it actually going to apply and change the rules, and then 2, because the psychic power is really good as well. Now again, Leviathan's still very good, but I think this brings it back in line with a lot of the other ones. This is a good change in my opinion. So next we have page 62, Stratagems, Power of the Hive Mind. Change the second sentence to read, select 1 Hive Tendril Psyker character unit from your army. So, you know what? I should have paid attention to that. Maybe 1 sec. Let's look and see exactly what that was. Alright, so page 62, Stratagem, Power of the Hive Mind. So use this stratagem in your psychic phase. Select 1 Hive Tendril Psyker unit from your army. Until the end of the phase, that unit can attempt to manifest 1 additional psychic power. So they changed it to select 1 Hive Tendril Psyker character unit from your army. Okay, so instead of just saying Hive Tendril Psyker, it has to be a Hive Tendril Psyker character now. So you could use it on like a Hive Tyrant or something like that, but you can't use it on anything that's not a character, but is also a Psyker. So like you can't use it on a squad of zoanthropes, but you can use it on a neurothrope, for instance. Makes sense. Makes sense. Takes away a little bit of the diversity of it, but I think overall that's probably what it was intended to be. Change the last sentence, page 64, Stratagems Overrun. Change the last sentence to read, if there are no enemy models within engagement range of that unit, models in that unit can make a normal move. So that one is page 64, Overrun. Use this stratagem at the end of the fight phase. Select 1 Hive Tendril unit from your army that made a charge move this turn. If there are no enemy models within engagement range of that unit, models in that unit can make a normal move instead of making a consolidation move. Change the last sentence to read, so it said before, if there are no enemy models within engagement range of that unit. If there are no enemy models within engagement range of that unit. So it's still the same. And then models in that unit can make a normal move instead of making a consolidation move. Models in that unit can make a normal move. So they took out the term instead of making a consolidation move and just made it the models can make a normal move. So that is interesting. I'm not sure exactly where that comes into bearing, but that is what they changed. They took away instead of making a consolidation move. So maybe they can still make both. I'm not sure. That's weird. So next we have page 64, Stratagems, Encircle the Prey. So obviously this is a big one. If you are not familiar with Encircle the Prey, it is 1 command point. Use this stratagem at the end of your turn. Select 1 Burrower's unit or unit that can fly from your army. Remove that unit from the battlefield in the reinforcement step of your next movement phase. Oh, sorry, that was a period there. From the battlefield, period. In the reinforcement step of your next movement phase, you can set that unit back up anywhere on the battlefield, anywhere that is more than 9 inches away from any enemy models. If the battle ends and the unit is not on the battlefield, it is destroyed. A unit cannot be selected for the stratagem if it was set up on the battlefield this turn. So the new Encircle the Prey reads, change the first sentence to read, use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. So that is interesting because that completely changes the usefulness of the stratagem. So previously, the stratagem read, use this stratagem at the end of your turn. So you just did your whole turn, and then you use the stratagem, and then you literally immediately select one burrower unit or unit that can fly from your army. Remove that unit from the battlefield. So you basically take your whole turn, attack, fight, whatever, and then at the end of your turn, you pick that model up so your opponent can't hurt it on their turn. Now it's completely different. Change the first sentence to read, use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. So now you basically have moved with this model, and now you have to pick it up off the table. Use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. That was what we changed the first sentence to read. So let's read it the new way. Use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. Select one burrower unit that can fly from your army, or burrower's unit or unit that can fly from your army. Remove that unit from the battlefield. So now in your movement phase, you pick that model up and remove it. So you don't get to use it for your whole turn like you did before and then remove it. Now you basically move and then you remove it. So this completely changes the stratagem, completely nerfs it. And in my opinion, it was too strong before. Now the real question is, should they have just made the stratagem more expensive and kept it the same, like 2 or 3 command points? Probably, because this completely changes it. I mean, it's basically useless now. The only way this is good is that I can think of is if you just need to put something back in Deep Strike so you can pop it up somewhere else, or if you need to, I mean, you're not even really protecting it. I guess if you're overextended somewhere, your opponent say failed to kill one of your flyers and now it's your turn again, and you know that there's nowhere you can move that's safe, so they're going to kill your unit if you don't take it off the table. I don't know, it completely nerfs that stratagem. Again, not saying that's a bad thing. The stratagem was obviously overpowered, but they made it so it does something completely different now. So now you basically move, and then at the end of that move, you pick the model up and take it off the table. So you lose that entire turn of usefulness that you would normally have with that model. So again, completely nerfing that stratagem. Next, page 72, Shadow Operations. Spore nodes. Change the third sentence to read. If this action is successfully completed, place one objective marker anywhere within 1 inch of the unit that completed this action. Let's look at that one. Alright, so Shadow Operations. Change the third sentence to read. Okay, so let's look at this. Score 4 victory points each time a unit from your army successfully completes the following action. Seed Spore Node action. One troop unit from your army can start to perform this action at the end of your movement phase. From the second battle round onwards, if it is within 6 inches of your opponent's deployment zone and not within 6 inches of any Spore Node objective markers. This action is completed at the end of your turn. If this action is successfully completed, place one objective marker anywhere wholly within your opponent's deployment zone and within 1 inch of this unit that completed this action. The objective marker represents a Spore Node, but does not count as an objective marker for any other rules purposes other than for this secondary objective. So Shadow Operation Spore Node, new version, change the third sentence to read, if this action is successfully completed, place one objective marker anywhere within 1 inch of the unit completed this action. So that was the third sentence. Alright, so the sentence before, that's like a huge run-on sentence from GW. The action is completed at the end of your turn. If the action is successfully completed, place one objective marker anywhere wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. If this is one objective marker anywhere within 1 inch of the unit that completed this action. Anywhere within 1 inch versus If this action is successfully completed, place one objective marker anywhere wholly within your opponent's deployment zone and within 1 inch of the unit that completed this action. So it no longer needs to be wholly within your opponent's deployment zone. It just has to be within 1 inch. So not a huge change, but a change nonetheless. And then page 86, ability synapse. Change the title to say synapse aura. So I guess they're just sort of specifying that it is in fact an aura. And then next we have page 90, Hive Tyrant War Gear options. So this model cannot be equipped with more than one heavy venom cannon and cannot be equipped with more than one stranglehorn cannon. So this is a clarification. The way the book was actually worded, you technically could take two of the same. Because it says your monstrous bonesword and lash whip can be replaced with one of the following: one heavy venom cannon or one stranglehorn cannon. And then the next bullet point is this model's two monstrous scything talons can be replaced with one of the following: one heavy venom cannon, one stranglehorn cannon. And then it says afterwards, this model cannot be equipped with both a stranglehorn cannon and a heavy venom cannon. But technically, you could replace the first one with a heavy venom cannon and then replace the second one with a heavy venom cannon, or do the same thing for stranglehorn cannons and take two of each. So now they basically made it so you can only have one heavy venom cannon or one heavy stranglehorn cannon. You cannot have both, and you cannot have two of the same, which is, I believe, how it was supposed to be, because a Hive Tyrant with two heavy venom cannons is very, very good. Next we have page 105, Zoanthrope keywords, add synapse. So under their keywords they didn't have synapse, but they're clearly a synapse creature, so that was just a clarification. Page 118. Alright, page 118, Tyrannocyte, battlefield role. Change the battlefield role symbol to dedicated transport. Okay, that makes sense. So it's currently heavy support, but it should be a transport, which makes sense. They clearly made a mistake there. And then abilities, aerial seating. Change the second sentence to read: this transport model can be set up in the reinforcement step of your first, second, or third movement phase, regardless of any mission rules, anywhere on the battlefield that is more than 9 inches away from any enemy models. And previously it said this transport model can be set up in the reinforcement step of your first, second, or third movement phase, regardless of any mission rules. And then it says, it clarifies, it still has to be more than 9 inches away. So again, that makes perfect sense. Page 126, a glossary, adaptive physiologies. So let me just flip to that. Alright, so 126, adaptive physiologies. A unique upgrade that can be given to Hive Tendril monster models, excluding characters and Titanic models. So this is sort of like the glossary, like summary. Let me just find it really quick. Okay, adaptive physiologies. A unique upgrade that can be given to Hive Tendril monster models, excluding named characters. Okay, so they just added in Titanic. In the regular portion of the book, it already says Titanic. They just added it into the glossary, like the summary. And then if a Maleceptor model, this is the FAQ, has the Enraged Reserves adaptive physiologies, is it considered to have double the number of wounds remaining for the purpose of psychic overload ability? No. Enraged Reserves only does this for characteristics, not any other rules. So essentially, Enraged Reserves makes it so you count as double the number of wounds for your for your damage, basically taken to like your degrading monster. And what they're asking is, on the Maleceptor, as it degrades, it does less and less additional mortal wounds when it manifests a psychic power, because the Maleceptor has an ability Obviously, you probably have heard of this at this point in time because it's one of the most powerful. But the Maleceptor, if it manifests a psychic power on over a, like, it has a chart on its data sheet, and it says the model's wounds remaining 8+, 5 to 7, and then 1 to 4. And then it says mortal wounds suffered 3, 2, and 1. And then the psychic overload ability is each time this model successfully manifests a psychic power or completes a psychic action. If the result of your psychic test was 7 or more after resolving the psychic test, psychic power rather, the closest enemy unit within 12 inches suffers a number of mortal wounds shown in the table below. So if the Maleceptor uses, say, Smite and manifests it on a 10, it's over 7. So you resolve the damage from the Smite, and then if the Maleceptor has 8+ wounds remaining of its 15, it would do an extra 3 mortal wounds from this ability. If it has 5 to 7 wounds remaining, it would do an extra 2. If it has 1 to 4 wounds remaining, it would do an extra 1. So this question is basically, if this Maleceptor is already degraded, and say it only has, let's say 7 wounds left, which would be its second bracket, it would count with this ability as having 14 wounds. So then would it be able to basically do the 3-up mortal wounds instead of the 2 mortal wounds? And the answer is no. It still counts as its regular degraded for this ability. And then finally, the last one question, the Psychic Oversight Synaptic Imperative allows units performing a psychic action to still manifest psychic powers. If a unit performs a psychic action, does it count as one of the psychic powers that the unit is allowed to manifest that turn? Yes, performing a psychic action is treated the same as if attempting to manifest a psychic power, and so counts against the number of psychic powers a unit can manifest. So basically what this is saying is, normally there is a restriction when you do a psychic action, you can't then cast psychic powers afterwards. It's one or the other. You can either do however many psychic powers you're allowed to, or you can do a psychic action. But there is a psychic synaptic imperative, which is from the Maleceptor. Which is called Psychic Oversight. And while the synaptic imperative ability is active for your army, a friendly hive tendril unit is within 6 inches of a synapse model. Bullet point 1. If that unit is performing an action, it can make ranged attacks without that action failing. Bullet point 2. The unit can start to perform an action even if it advanced or fell back this turn. And then bullet point 3. This is what we're paying attention to. If that unit has the Psyker keyword, performing a psychic action does not prevent it from manifesting psychic powers. So it removes the restriction of psychic actions, and they no longer prohibit you from doing psychic powers. So now, say you were using this ability on your Maleceptor. Maleceptor can normally cast 2 psychic powers per turn. The first would be its psychic action. You would cast that, and then if, once that was resolved, you could then, using this ability, cast Smite or whatever other psychic power they actually have. And then the first would be the psychic action for your cast, and the second would be the psychic power you choose for your cast. So you would essentially, instead of just getting 1 psychic action or 2 psychic powers, you could have a blend of 1 psychic action and 1 psychic power. So very cool. Or alternatively, I think you can still only perform 1 action per turn. So you couldn't do like the Maleceptor psychic action and then like the mission's psychic action. So yeah, overall that's actually it for the Errata. So it is just 1 page of Errata. There are some big clarifications, and I should say, basically like corrections, or in this case, they're really nerfs. I mean, it's not necessarily like, typically an FAQ and an Errata is sort of like clarification. These are more like sort of like the balanced status light, to tell you the truth. Because the Leviathan psychic part, they did a great job here. Honestly, I have to give it to them for balance. This was a great decision, because the 2 biggest issues people were having was the Leviathan psychic power was too good, because you could basically use that psychic power to make anything in your army really, really good. And you have a lot of diversity because there's so many different synaptic imperatives you could use this ability for. So eliminating that and making it core only makes all your core stuff better, because now you have this ability to do it, and then it makes all your non-core stuff just slightly worse, or anything that you were thinking about casting this on. because it is pretty restrictive what's core in this book. You have, obviously you have like your warriors, you have all your termagants, hormagaunts, gargoyles, you have your carnifexes, and then you have like your, raveners? And then I think that's the majority of the core. There's not a lot of core in this book. Most of them are like the endless multitude, like the swarms. So I think this is a big change. In my opinion, if Leviathan was being played by, let's say, 75% of people previously, I think this does enough that Leviathan is played by probably 50% of people. And then next after that, the Power of the Hive Mind. Select one Hive Tendril Psyker character. I think that's a big deal as well. It now takes away a little bit of your diversity. Most your Psykers are characters in this army, so it's not a huge deal. But it takes away a little bit of power from units like zoanthropes and stuff like that, which is good because you want to make it a little bit more like, on your important characters, not just anybody that can cast psychic powers. And then next we have, so for instance, who else can't use that? I don't think a Maleceptor is a character. The problem with this is that you could have basically, something with 2 casts, casting 3 times, and you could do that literally every single turn. And then on your Maleceptor, you have the ability to cast 3 times in one turn. And then with his Psychic Overload ability, each one of those casts could potentially do 3 mortal wounds. So you're doing 3 extra mortal wounds per cast, assuming you get a 7 or more. So that's 9 mortal wounds, plus the effects of Smite and your 2 psychic powers, or your psychic action, Smite, and your other psychic power. So now he can't use it because the Maleceptor is a monster, Synapse, Psyker, Horn Chitin, Maleceptor. He does not have the character keyword. So that's going to restrict basically the Maleceptor, which is the most important thing because now he can't do 3 casts every turn. That is huge. And then it's also going to restrict the zoanthropes. The Neurothrope could still use it for 3 casts per turn because he is a character. The zoanthropes are not characters, and they only have 1 psychic cast normally. So it takes away a little diversity for the zoanthropes, makes them slightly worse, but it really slows down the Maleceptor being able to not cast 3 times. You can still use it on a Turbogon. You can still use it on a Hive Tyrant. You can still use it on a bunch of other stuff. And it's still very good and will probably get used very often. But that is a huge nerf because it takes away 3 mortal wounds that you're doing with your Maleceptor every single turn, basically, plus whatever the 3rd power he's casting is. So you go cast that 3rd power on somebody else, it balances out, but you're still down 3 mortal wounds a turn. And if you times that by 5 turns, potentially, you're talking about 15 less mortal wounds over a game. So it's a pretty big deal. Again, very good decision on their part, in my opinion. The overrun part, I'm still not sure exactly what the difference is there because they basically just took out the normal move instead of a follow-up. I'm not sure. And then Encircle the Prey is huge. Changing Encircle the Prey is massive. That basically, I don't want to say that this stratagem is useless now, but previously, okay, there's a couple big changes on Encircle the Prey. Use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase, which means previously when you used it, it was at the end of the turn, so it was outside of your normal turn structure. Therefore, you could actually use it multiple times. So you could have a Hive Tyrant that you just like suicide bombed into your opponent's army, destroyed a bunch of stuff, and now it's vulnerable to death. Previously, you just pay 1 stratagem, pick him up, and then you're like, he'll come back next turn. And then you could also say have like a Harpy or something that flew into your opponent's territory, dropped a bunch of spore mines, shot, and now you're like, well, you know what? Since we're outside of the normal structure of the like battle round or game turn, I'm actually going to pay 1 more CP and I'm going to pick that one up too. So you could actually use it multiple times, the same way you can use like pre-game stratagems multiple times. This now restricts it because you're doing it in the movement phase. So now you can only ever do it once per turn because you're doing it in the movement phase. And it says specifically, use this stratagem at the end of your movement phase. So it's only useful in your movement phase at the end for 1 creature. And then the use of it before, obviously, was to catapult your unit, go fight, and then pick them up before they could be hurt back. Now, your opponent would still get a chance to fight back in that combat, but presumably you would put it in a situation where it would kill whatever it was fighting, and then it's sitting there, unimpeded, and then you pick it up. Now you have to do it in the movement phase, so nothing else happens. You don't have the ability. Previously, you could you could move with the thing, you could cast a bunch of psychic powers, do a bunch of damage, you could then shoot with it, and then on top of that, you could charge into combat and fight, and then pick it up. Now, it's literally the end of the movement phase. So you move your unit, you don't get to do anything else, because now you're going to pay 1 command point and pick it up off the table. So it misses out on all those extra phases worth of usefulness it could have done. So again, huge nerf to this. And again, it was too powerful before. Should they have just made it 2 or 3 command points instead and kept it the same? I don't know. They did what they did. So that being said, Encircle the play, huge nerf. And again, probably a good idea. I mean, it was too powerful how it was set before. So, and then the Shadow Operations, not a big change. The Synapse Aura, we already knew that. The Hive Tyrant weapons. So a lot of people were abusing this and taking 2 Venom Cannons. Obviously, and then making one of them like the Relic Venom Cannon. So, it was definitely just too powerful before. Now you can't take 2 Venom Cannons or 2 Strangleworm Cannons. That's how it was intended, always, in my opinion. And then Zoanthropes were supposed to have Synapse the whole time. So again, as intended. Tyrannocyte was basically as intended. The adaptive physiologies, it was never meant to go on Titanic units, and it says that clearly in the regular book. So yeah, so that's it. Overall, what do I think of these? It's definitely nerfs. These are definitely nerfs. You can call it an FAQ errata, but these are nerfs. They nerfed the most important 3 things in the book, basically, in my opinion. Without actually nerfing the Maleceptor straight up or changing his points cost or whatever, you now have taken away anything that can fly. You have made worse by changing Encircle the Prey, which is good, because the Hive Tyrant was the primary thing Encircle the Prey was getting used on, and then the second thing it was getting used on was Harpies, and that was too powerful. Alternatively, though, you could use it like in a tricky way also on something like Unsuspecting, but in my opinion, that was the main 2 things people were using it on. So overall, I think that's good. I think they made a good decision on that one. It's a huge nerf. It'll probably, that's probably not going to get used barely ever now. It's a very, very niche stratagem at this point in time. And then fixing the Leviathan psychic power is a nerf only for Leviathan. It makes things like Carnifexes and Tyranid warriors and stuff like that actually better, because now they're going to get, because they have the core keyword, they're more likely to get this bonus ability. And you're more likely to want to use them if you're playing Leviathan or buff them up. But overall, it's definitely a nerf. And then I think that is going to lead to, that could very well be the deal breaker between people taking Leviathan versus another Hive Fleet. So again, huge nerf in my opinion, and rightfully so. I mean, it was a very strong psychic power. And then finally, I think the changes to the Maleceptor are massive as well, obviously. Making it so that he cannot use that psychic ability is huge. That power of the Hive Mind psychic power was huge. So taking away his ability to cast a 3rd psychic power and taking away his ability to do that extra 3 mortal wounds per turn is huge. So overall, big nerfs. I think Tyranids are still going to be in a good place. I think overall, people are still kind of getting their groove with them. But the Tyranids are not dominating like people thought they were going to. They're still doing well. They're obviously very strong. But we're not seeing them just like completely sweep the meta like we saw with some of the other armies. Like, for instance, Custodes or, Harlequins. So I don't think they need some crazy, horrible nerfs. I don't think they're going to need to put out like an emergency balance status light. I think this basically takes the cake on that. So let me know what you guys think. If you understand the overrun changes and I'm missing something here, I'm curious about that. I'm not sure why it says in like normal move instead of consolidation versus just a normal move. I'm really not sure about that. Maybe it has something to do with like your ability to embark into transport or something. I don't know, because Tyranids don't really have transport in the same way. I don't know. Very strange wording or rule right there. But overall, I think this is great. I think it takes Tyranids in line with where they should be, fixes the most obvious issues in the entire book, which was, the Maleceptor doing way too many mortal wounds. So we have substantially decreased that by taking away his ability to cast a third psychic power, and then also not being able to do those extra mortal wounds on the psychic power. I think it's huge for Encircle the Prey, because that was very, very powerful in everyone's army. And then obviously, changing the power of the hive mind altogether, but the Leviathan psychic power is huge as well, because having a good psychic power is pretty much you have to pick if you're going to take a lot of psychic in a Tyranid army, you need that 7th psychic power to be good. So making that psychic power not really that good, or not nearly as good, makes the balance into the other. I don't think anybody's going to be like, I'm not playing Tyranids anymore because of Leviathan's changes to the psychic power. But I do think a lot of people that weren't even considering another high fleet now will say, okay, Leviathan is still good, but is it that good? Is my composition fitting the Leviathan scheme that well now without that psychic power hitting like anybody? Or, should I change it? Because being able to basically give, like, say for instance, you have, some big bugs that don't have invulnerable saving throws, you can give one of them a 4-up invulnerable saving throw, which is pretty cool. But say you have like 2 exocrines or something like that. Previously, you could give one an invulnerable saving throw, and then you could use the Leviathan psychic power to give the other one a 4-up invulnerable saving throw. So now basically all your big stuff has invulnerable saving throws. Or say like a Tyranids or something that doesn't have an invulnerable save, you could take 2 of them, give one the upgrade, and then give one the psychic power. Same with like a Harpy. You could have 2 Harpies, give one the invulnerable save, and then upgrade the second one with the psychic power to have an invulnerable saving throw. So you're essentially making it so there's no good targets for your opponent to shoot at. Now that goes away, because you can't pick any of those units I said now. You can't pick a Tyranids, you can't pick a Harpy, you can't pick a exocrine. So that's huge. Now, are we going to see more Leviathan armies with Carnifexes or big warrior squads? Yeah, sure, probably. And it's still very good. But again, I think overall it's definitely a nerf. So these are definitely nerfs coming in. This is not a, FAQ errata in a sense as we normally see. This is more of a nerf for sure, because they're not just clarifying things or responding to questions. They're actually changing huge abilities in the book. They're completely changing a psychic power and limiting it. They're completely changing 2 stratagems and limiting them. And then they are completely... What was the third one? Yeah, that's the main 3 things they're doing. They're changing a psychic power for one specific army, and then they're changing 2 stratagems that were basically auto-use every turn. I mean, I think you would be hard-pressed to play a Tyranid player that wasn't using Encircle the Prey and Hive Mind, Power of the Hive Mind, every single turn. So that, in my opinion, is a huge change. So, big nerf, obviously. And then, the Hive Tyrant, too. Not being able to take 2 Venom Cannons is huge. And then, obviously, Zoanthropes were meant to have Synapse. That's the type of thing you would normally see in, like, an Errata or FAC. But overall, I think this is good. I don't think it completely, hurts Tyranids. I mean, it definitely makes them slightly weaker. But I don't think you're like, oh, man, I'm just throw these Tyranids in the garbage now. I think it puts them in line with where they're supposed to be. I think it tones down the Maleceptor without completely nerfing him. I think that is huge. Tones down the Hive Tyrant without completely nerfing it. That is huge. And then tones down Leviathan without completely nerfing it. Very good decisions, in my opinion. Overall, I think this is good. So let me know what you think down below. Are some of these abilities that just got nerfed what you've been having trouble with when you play against Tyranids? Are some of these the only thing that's been allowing you to win with your current Tyranids? Definitely always curious to hear from you guys. But going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Let me know what you think down below. Are there more nerfs need to happen? Do we need to play some games now and see how it is? I think this is huge. I think this is going to really bring Tyranids in balance. And they'll still be one of the top tiers. But I don't think they will be blowing people out of the water in the same way that people were afraid of. Not that they were doing that anyway. Certain armies were having big trouble with Tyranids for sure, and certain armies will still have big trouble with Tyranids. But I think overall this is good for the meta, good for Tyranids, and good for anybody that was playing against them that maybe was getting frustrated or was, afraid to play against them. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up there. Definitely good to see this. I do appreciate GW has been coming out pretty on point with these errata and updates, FAQs, etc. So that is definitely good. They have been working hard on the balance overall, not before books and stuff comes out, but once it's out, I think they've been doing pretty good about hearing feedback from the tournaments, from the players, and sort of adapting. So definitely some good changes in my opinion. But going to go ahead and wrap it up there. So that's it for today. This is Warhammer Man from Warhammer Man Studios. If you do enjoy this type of content, reactions, news, reviews, or you're into tutorials from painting, modeling, converting, magnetization for anything from Warhammer 40,000, Kill Team Necromunda, Age of Sigmar, Warcry, Horus Heresy, pretty much any of the Games Workshop games, and then also definitely dabble in some D&D as well. Make sure to like and subscribe, as I greatly appreciate it. Really helps the channel to grow and helps me to bring this content to you for absolutely nothing. That's it for today, Warhammer Man Studios. I'm Warhammer Man, and I'm out of here.